Before I jump into the next topic, I think I should discuss some Q&As that are discussed. Probably we'll discuss about 4 to 5 questions that are there here. I'll try to give weightage to the most upvoted questions that are there. There are few questions that are upvoted. So let's see. So the first question is, any reference site which gives real-time examples of data structures? Yes, there is a beautiful site called Geeks for Geeks. This is the Bible of algorithms and data structures. I prefer this website more than any other website. That's because of all the other alternates that are there, like CodeChef, LeetCode, etc., etc. Geeks for Geeks is something that very Indian. The English that is spoken is very Indian. The English that is there is very simple, and the expectations of the people who post the content here is same as the expectations of the people who are visiting this website. So if you control F data structures and you go here data structures, there are a ton of examples that help you understand about the various questions that are there on various data structures that are there. Visit as many of these data structures as possible. Let's take, for example, array. In array, he'll give brief analysis of what an array is, what are the types of questions that are there for an array. 25, 25, 25. Tons of questions are there for just array. So this is the website that I recommend you go whenever you are in need of some questions that you need. I'll put this in the group chat. This is for data structures. Similarly, there are questions for algorithms. This is the section for algorithms: sorting, greedy, dynamic programming, pattern searching, graph algorithm, randomized algorithms. You name it, the content is there in Geeks for Geeks. You should keep visiting this Geeks for Geeks, like you visit Google News in the morning, or like you visit InShots, or if you're a TikTok fan, like you see TikTok, you should probably visit this Geeks for Geeks website every once in a while. And let's say you are giving interview for some big company, and there are interview experiences recorded for almost all the companies that you can think of. Google interview experience, Amazon experience, Infosys experience, Walmart, Wipro, Mu Sigma, TCS, you name the company, and the experiences are there here. Somewhere these are sorted by companies. Okay, I'll leave that for you to explore. Just Google company-wise interview experience in Geeks for Geeks, and that will take you to company-wise sorting. Okay. When we search on Google, is it binary search mostly? So searching on Google, so by this query, I understand when we search on the search box that is there, is this binary search is what is being asked. As you can see, more than one result is available for a given set of keys that are there. There are something called as tries. In algorithms. Basically, what these tries do is create a tree for all the set of words that are possible. So let's say for this particular page, Control F, F-I-N-D, F-I-N-E, nothing is there. Keyword. So for this key, KVY key combination, one trie structure is pre-calculated in this browser. So that trie tree structure will take you to whatever keys that are there. I am assuming the similar case for this particular match of keywords that are there. So for a given letter, for a given word, these are the results that we got. So I'm thinking there is a very big trie tree that is there in the Google Flash memory, and for the given words, the most recent or the most ranked uh, keywords will be pulled in and will be put. It's not very easy to comprehend what algorithm which that is they are using, because this is a very mature uh, very mature result set that is coming from the backend, and I don't think there is one single approach that is there to give this particular kind of result. Out of, let's say there are about few thousands of Google engineers that are there, about 60% of them, 40 to 50, 60% of them work on search engine optimization. So it's quite possible that it's not just one algorithm that's there, it's just more than that. In your opinion, what is an interview looking for if they ask you to use recursion specifically to solve a problem when it can be easily done using a different approach? Is it to see how you make decision on how to choose an approach, or just to see if you can solve the problem using recursion? I think it's quite a big mix of both. They want to understand why you chose the other approach over recursion, and they also want you to solve the tough problem that is using recursion. It's quite possible that easier solution is either iteration or something else, but the interviewers would like to test you how you would perform when the scenario is present to you in a different way. So every time we write some code, we have to adapt to some conditions. Let's say if condition A is not there, the solution will be very easy, but the condition A is there. Now how would you solve the problem? Is something real time. So the reason that they might ask you to use recursion is probably to assess you if you can change your way of thinking and solve the problem in a different way. I hope I answered this question. Let's take one last question, then we'll move on to the session. Quicksort is not used in most of the languages for implementing sort. They use timsort. It's a combination of merge and insertion sort. Since you said quicksort is the best approach, I have a doubt on this. Space completion of merge is one. Go and write in the worst case. I'm not really sure of this. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's quite possible that they use a combination of merge sort and insertion sort. But to blatantly say most of the languages, is probably little lame. Also, it's possible that quicksort is something that came recently, and most of these platforms are written quite a while ago. For example, Windows is written some time ago, and probably quicksort came after that. So for you to solve in a given example, I would say merge sort is less than quicksort, because merge sort the space complexity of merge sort is so often, but the space complexity of quicksort is even better. It does the sorting in place. So yeah, we kind of negate each other, but yeah, this is a debatable question, and I still stick to my words. I think quicksort is better than merge sort. Maybe we can discuss this some other time when you and me face each other. Sit sometime there and we can discuss. So one of code switch here. One interesting question: big theta and big omega for complexity. They are not generally considered. I think from the definition it says one is less than and one is less than or equal to. I'm not sure which one is less than, which one is less than or equal to, but yeah, generally big omega is what is considered. I don't think even interviewers will want to nail you on these questions. So yeah, concentrate on what is more important, and move on with this. Uh, you know, uh, Paining yourself of straining yourself of understanding what's the difference between theta and omega. Also, this is my personal opinion. If you think you have faced this question in some interview and you think this will be asked somewhere else, it's okay for you to prepare, but I personally don't think this will be asked anywhere. Okay. What do you mean by binary index tree? Uh, this coding problems are a different level. I don't know. We can have a discussion about this offline. I think this question's scope is not limited to this session that's there. I can see you asking me for the answer to this in the chat also, but I'm not sure what binary index tree is. And inversion through DNC, I need to dwell deeper into what this question is before I can make any comments on this. Yeah, maybe you can connect sometime offline and we can discuss about this. Yeah, so this quicksort, I'll start about quicksort right now. In the words of the author of the course, he thinks quicksort is the greatest algorithm. Even I think the same. That's pretty debatable, I understand, but I'll stick to my answer. Quicksort is great because the average runtime is about n log n. The worst runtime is about order of n square, but the worst runtime comes when the given array is in some sort of already sorted fashion. But in real time, that's only 50% likely. I'll tell you why it's only 50% likely. And yeah, this quicksort has got of n log n runtime. Let's discuss about the quicksort. So let's say this is the given array and this is the required output. The idea for quicksort is to partition the given array in some way, and left of the partition and right of the partition will be solved separately. That just a second. Yeah, so we try to pick a pivot in the given array. Let's say it's generally one index element. So which element to pick a pivot is altogether a different discussion we can have. Let's say first element we have taken as a pivot, and we try to find the partition in the given array. We find the partition in the given array after swapping few elements in such a way that after the partition, the ones to the left are smaller and ones to the right are greater than the given pivot element. This particular creating of partition will take about O of n time, and this will reduce the problem size to smaller halves, to two smaller sub problems. So the idea is choose a pivot, create the array with elements less than the pivot, create the array with elements greater than pivot, and go ahead with this. Let me take you to the next slide. So let's take this particular example. Let's say the pivot is the first element 3. And we have to take a position in the array such that the elements to the left of the given pivot are lesser than the given pivot, and the elements to the right are greater than the given pivot. For given 3, probably the final array is something like this. 3k left may 2 and 1 are there, and to the right there are elements which are greater than 3. The right array is not in any sorted order, and to the left is not sorted order again. But after this iteration, we have found the right position for the number 3. So for this particular problem, the idea is, assume the first position is the right position and hope that none of the other elements are lesser than 3. If we encounter some number that is lesser than the pivot, we swap the position of the first element with the one in the right. So yeah, the first element is 8. The next element is 2, 5, 4, 1, 7, 6. The first element is 8. 8 is greater than 3. So we don't mind the position of 8. The next element is 2. 2 is smaller than 3. So we should shift it to the left of the final position of the pivot. So we've swapped the positions of these two. It becomes 2 and 8. And the position of our pivot will be now the new position. Initially, it's the position here, the index 1 position. Now we have incremented, it will be now index 2 position. And for the index 2 positions, the ones to its right should be greater than 3 so far. I mean, whichever is so far visited. Ones to its left should be less than 3. So for the given position, only these two elements are visited so far. So the partition will be between 2 and 8. Left may is less, right may is higher. So we scan the next element, 5, it's higher, 1, it's smaller. So we swap the index plus 1 position with 1. So 1 comes here, 8 goes here, and so on. And for the rest of the element, they're all larger than 3. And for the given index, we finally swap the position of the pivot. So 3 comes to the pivot's position. And what we are left is an array in which the place of 3 is final and 2 smaller subproblems which can be solved in a similar fashion. This is one classic example of recursion also, and one classic example of divide and conquer also. So yeah, now we go to the smaller subproblems and solve them in similar way. In this given smaller subproblem 1 and 2, we'll pick 1, we'll find 2, and if the position of 1 is already reached, we'll leave it, done. 5, 8, 4, 7, we'll find the position of 5. put it there and go iteratively with the rest of the elements. This is the pseudocode for the partition. I don't want to dwell deeper into the pseudocode. You can take a look at the slides later. But I hope I have made some explanation as to what Quicksort is. So I'm trying to say the Quicksort implementation is done in place. And extra memory is far lesser than other types of sorts that are there. Let me discuss why the just a second. I'll try to discuss why choosing a good pivot is important, because depending on the pivot, the next size of the subproblem depends, and the size of the subproblem is generally what decides the number of iterations that we are left before we reach the final solution. Yeah, depends on the quality of the pivot. The runtime of the Quicksort depends on the quality of the pivot that's there. So if the input array is already sorted, what do you think will be the runtime? If it's already sorted, the next amount of subproblem that we get is n-1, just n-1. So it's again running the algorithm on similar size array. So it's about order of n square. But so this is like the worst case. But let's say we have picked some median element. Every time we pick the pivot, it so happens that the pivot divides the array equally into two halves. So in this case, the order is something like order of n log n. So the order is generally in between order of n square and order of n log n. We can discuss why, why order of n log n is the average, because most of the times the chances of you, so let's say this array is totally sorted, and the chances of you landing on some already sorted array is, far lesser than, any picking a random element. So a random pivot will generally split the total array somewhere between 25% and 75%, which is generally good enough. So dividing it into 25% and 75% is in itself bringing down the size to 1/4 or 3/4. That's like algorithmically crunching down the size of the array once again. So yeah, the average order of running time of a Quicksort is order of n log n. The proof, etc., are shared in the details of this slide. I'll share the slides. You can take a look at them. Let's move on to next topic. I would like to discuss some parts of probability also. Yeah, before probability, let's see if there are any questions. So I have one question, which is calculating inversion through DNC is optimal or through BIT. So Biplav, I'm not sure what BIT is, so I'm not really in a position to comment on which one is better. Uh, Maybe I can dig into the details sometime later and we can discuss about this. And one more question is counting sort better than quick sort? I'm not really sure what this counting sort is. Uh, for this also, probably I'll get into some research and probably then I'll be able to understand and comment on the question that you posted here. Okay. Time to get into some probability. Yes, give me a second. Sorry for the delay. Just give me one more. Yep. So the reason I'm trying to cover probability also is some range of interview questions are concentrated on N choose P, NCK, NPK, something like that. So I think some covering of uh, what a sample space is, what a random variable is, will help you understand assess some of the algorithms better. And I'm assuming that you understand what is NCK and what is NPK. And yeah. So sample space is represented by omega. Omega is all possible outcomes, and each outcome has some probability p which is not zero. That is basically uh, an outcome I has some probability, and sum of all these outcomes probability is 1. That's basically saying we are covering all the possibilities of sample spaces with all the sum of possibilities of each event that is possible. For example, when we are rolling 2 dice, the sample space is number 1 on first dice, number 1 on second dice, 2 1 3 1, and so on. This is all called sample space. Sample space is basically all the possible outcomes. And yeah, similarly, if you're trying to choose a random pivot for quicksort, the index of pivot, see in the final one, the order of probability for any element that can come is about 1 by n. That's because the index can be the pivot can be any of them. An event is a subset of sample space, and the probability of an event is sum of all the events, sum of all the sub events that cause the superset of event that is. For example, let's consider the event that the sum of 2 dice is 7, and this is a sample subset is when 1 6 2 5 3 4 4 3, all of these are called the given event, and the probability of this given event is out of the whole open space is 6 by 36, because the sum 7 can come in 6 possible ways. Total number of possibilities is about 36 times. So the probability of this event is about 1 by 6. So when we try to choose a pivot that can give us 20-75 split or better, so what's the probability? So given array, if you want a 25 to 75 split, that's essentially the numbers between 25 and 75. So the probability that the pivot will be one of these is about 25 to 75 by the whole, 1 to 100. That comes around 50 by 100. That's about 1 by 2. Yeah, an event is a subset of omega. A random variable is representation of the outcome. So sum of the 2 dice is a random variable. Size of subarray past to first recursive call is a random variable. So we are trying to assign some variable to one of the event that we are trying to judge here, that we are trying to evaluate here. That's called a random variable. Expectation is like, what is the average value of this random variable? Expectation of this given random variable is probability that it will happen in some real world function. Expectation of a given random variable is the average of all the probabilities that the given random variable can come. The sum of 2 dice, so sum of 2 dice can vary from 1 to 14. So what's the average of the sum of 2 dice? 1 to 14 by 2. Average of 14 and 1 is, average of 1 and 12 is, sorry, it comes between 2 and 12. So the average of 2 and 12 is 7. Similarly, what is the expectation of size of subarray past to the first recursive call in quicksort? So like we are saying, it will be anywhere between so let's say x is subarray size. Expectation of x will be size could be 0, size could be 1, size could be 2, size could be 3, and so on. And each of that happening's probability is 1 by n. So it's n minus 1 by 2. Average of all this will be n minus 1 by 2. N into n minus 1 by 2 by n, which is n minus 1 by 2. Linearity of expectations is one straight formula. Expected value of sum of all the random variables is equal to sum of the expectations of each of the random variables. We don't have to know the proof. We just have to keep it there. So one example is given here about, the need to assign a process to n servers, assign each process to one random server. What is the expected number of processes assigned to a given server? So there are n processes, n servers. What is the expected number of server assigned to a process? It's 1, but we're trying to mathematically prove it. So the sample space is omega, all assignments of process to servers, each equally likely. Total number of processes assigned to the first server is either 1 or 0. And, since the funda is, sum of all j equal to 1 to n, which is basically 1. So that's all about my probability revision. Sample spaces, events, and random variables. That's all. We'll discuss something about graphs also. Breadth first search, depth first search, and heaps. Let me open up. So breadth first search. So before breadth first search, we should discuss a little bit about graphs. Graphs are basically kind of data structures where objects are connected with more than one edge. So in array, the elements are sitting beside each other. In a linked list, first element and second element are linked with one edge. But in a graph, so some edges are generally directionary. Some edges are not necessarily directionary. So they are just edges. So a graph can be represented as it can be visualized as a few nodes connected to each other. So typical example of graph in our real world is internet and also probably network. Let's say I'm dialing from network that's there in my area. How do I fastly connect to some network that's there somewhere else in probably USA? What's the shortest path that's possible? That kind of real world problems can be solved by visualizing the data structures in the form of graphs. So the two of the most important graph search algorithms are breadth first search and depth first search. Let's get into the tiny weeny details of this. Breadth first search explores nodes in layers, essentially used to compute the shortest paths that are there, and this is also used to compute the connected components of an undirected graph. So by connected components, it means that any node can be reached from any node. That's what is called a connected component. For a given very large graph, we can compute the connected components also using the breadth first search. Depth first search is a little different. While breadth first search explores the graph in layers, depth first search concentrates on exploring each nodes. It's like going and exploring all the possible nodes that are there, and then backtracking from there to the initial node that's there. So this application is mostly used to find the connected components in a given graph, or topological sorting of given nodes that are there. We will get into the details. So breadth first search, it explores nodes in layers, and we use a queue while exploring the nodes of the breadth first search. So we choose one node, and by the end of the breadth first search, we will have computed all the shortest paths to all the nodes that are there. So from S to C, we will have computed the shortest path. From S to this node, we will have computed the shortest path. That's the idea. So we put S in a queue and mark S as visited, and either print the value of S or put the value of S in a given array or something, or whatever you can do with the value of the node that's there. Then we pop the element of the queue that's there. Then we put into the queue all the linked elements from S. So the next queue elements will be A and B. Now S is gone. Before S is gone, we printed the value of S. Now we go to the next element of the queue. Let's say the value is A. From A, we pop the element of the queue. We take out A. From A, we see whatever is reachable other than what are already visited. So C is reachable. So we put C here. We popped out A. C places here. Next element is B. It's not C but B, because this has already been visited by S. So B is visited. B is popped out from the queue, and whatever nodes are reachable from B are reached and added to the queue. So this is in essence what a BFS is. Yeah, this is a pseudocode that is there, and these are some proofs that are there for the breadth first search that is there. Breadth first search is aimed for undirected connectivity. We use this to find the connected components in a given graph. So connected components are basically one say which are all components reachable, two say which are all components reachable. If given a large data structure where they said all the nodes are connected or something, and you want to find the list of connected components that are there, you can run BFS on one by one. And after one iteration, you will have found all the connected components, and you start with the next set of node that is there. After that iteration, you will have found all the connected components that are there, and so on and so forth. That's about breadth first search. Let's get into depth first search. So like discussed, depth first search is different from BFS in a way that BFS concentrates on exploring nodes rather than computing the shortest paths that is there. Let's get into the details. So instead of a queue, we use a stack here. So while coding also, it's not necessary that we use stack, because we use recursive coding, recursive approach for this graph exploration. So firstly, we iterate, or we explore the node, yes, and see what is reachable from S. A or B. We can either go to A or B, but it doesn't matter. We go to A and we'll see what is possible from A, either these two nodes, any node. We go to C, let's say, C से क्या मिला है, B से D से क्या मिला है, and so on and so forth. Mark S as explored for every edge S comma free that is going from the starting node. If V is unexplored, run this algorithm on the new code, that new node that is there. So that's in short about depth first search. We use depth first search for topological sorting. So topological sorting might mean that to reach let's say this node, there are some prerequisites for this node, let's say V or W or S, or for these nodes there are some prerequisites like S. So in order to order the given things in the order of the dependencies or something, we name it as topological sorting. Depth first search is extensively used in topological sorting. Yeah, the topological sorting is essentially the same thing as DFS. You run DFS on various nodes one by one and print them. If the nodes are not done yet, we will start running on the rest of them as well. Something in those lines. Yeah, that's about depth first search. Okay, so we'll talk about a little bit about heaps also. Before that, it's 3:50. Let's take a break for 10 minutes.